now let's talk about social institutions. What are social institutions? Well, within every social structure, there are social institutions, and it's an institution providing a social order, making sure that everything is running accordingly. Like, are there laws in place? Or is there law enforcement in place? Is there a government in place? Is there a military in place? All of these things are social institutions, and yes, they govern our lives. Some, depending on the country, some very extreme, other countries not so extreme. For example, here in North Korea, the social institutions, the government controls a lot. In fact, if you want a haircut, these are the approved haircuts you can get. Anything other than this, you cannot get. So that's very controlling. And for the ladies, here you go. These are the approved hairstyles in North Korea. Anything other than this is not approved. So good luck with that. Now, let's talk about, how we are all influenced by the social structure. And within every social structure is our statuses and roles. Status is a title that you're given, and then the roles are your expected behavior for that status. Now, all of us do have a free will. However, when we start to take on a status, then we start to carry out certain roles. This gentleman, Philip Zimbardo, he did the Stanford prison experiment, and he was trying to say is that some of the most evil things in the world are not done by evil people. It's just people that have a certain statuses, and then they're expected to do certain things. And what happens is people get into the habit of saying, well, I'm just doing my job, right? I'm not a bad person, I'm just doing my job. And you're going to find that in your life. People are going to get promotions, and people are going to get different titles, and someone that was your friend is now your boss, or maybe now you're the boss. And now you're going to have to act a little bit different because you're given a different status and a different role. So in the Stanford prison experiment, he took these students and he said, you are the guards and you are the prisoners. And he found that they acted according to the statuses that they were given. The guards acted more conservative and in control, and the prisoners rebelled. And a very famous experiment, so be sure you are aware of the power of statuses and roles in society and how it influences our behavior all the time. Here is Abu Ghraib. This was a scenario where the real life version of the Stanford prison experiment, and prisoners, here we have prisoners, and the guards took things to very extreme measures. And again, you could say, well, how could the guards do such very extreme things? When they went to court, Philip Zimbardo did go to court, and he said, look, these people are just doing what I've already shown in an experiment. It's statuses and roles. They were carrying out what they believed they were supposed to do. And I've even seen this at when teachers go to a meeting. In a typical day, a teacher has statuses, and he is in control of the scenario. But when the teachers are sitting down in the desks for a meeting, all of a sudden they start acting very different. They start texting, they're not paying attention, and they're doing the exact thing that would upset them if they were the one in the front talking in the classroom. So another example of social structure. So how can people do such villainous things, when they say, well, I'm just doing my job? For example, here we have soldiers behind Adolf Hitler, and you can say, well, how could they do such, villainous things? Well, they're going to tell you, well, I was really just doing my job. I don't really have hatred in my heart. I was just doing what I'm supposed to do. Or even gang members. Wow, how could you kill someone you don't even know? Well, again, I was just doing what my status is. This is called cognitive dissonance theory. In order to reduce discomfort, we can justify our behavior. No matter what it is, people can always justify what they did. And that's a little bit of psychology in reference to carrying out behavior. Wow, how could you do that? All of these individuals in the background behind Hitler will tell you, well, I did it because it was just part of my job and it's not the real me, I was just carrying out my responsibilities. That's cognitive dissonance theory, and we all do it all the time. Not on this level, but on minor levels. If your parents told you to clean up the kitchen when they were gone all day at work and you didn't do it, instead of saying, you know what, I didn't do it and I was wrong, we start justifying, well, I had a lot of work to do and I had my own things to do, and you start defending yourself. Instead of just owning up and you said, you're right, I should have done it. Now let's talk a little bit about statuses. In society, we all have different statuses. Here is Judge Judy, and I've noticed that people that are judges, even though they're not in the courtroom, they're in everyday life, they might still act like they're a judge or they're in control. Or maybe, someone that was in the army years ago and they're no longer in the army, but they still act like they're in the army. Or maybe they talk to you as if you're in the army because they were in the army. And here's one of the students that was a prisoner in the Stanford prison experiment. A status, it's a position that someone occupies, right? A judge, a sergeant, a prison guard, or corrections officer, if you will. But sometimes the status, it becomes so powerful, it overrides all the other statuses. Now, here's a DJ named John DeLisi. Now, when I met John, he didn't have any tattoos. But then once he became a DJ on the radio, he became covered in tattoos. Why did this happen? Because the master status, it's the status that overrides all the other statuses. For example, this judge, yes, she's a mother and yes, she's a wife, but it's the judge that has taken over her personality. Or let's say this individual right here, he might be a father, he might be a husband, but the fact that he was in the army became his overriding status. Same thing with this gentleman right here. Being the DJ was the number one status. And this is the master status. And a master status can be kind of harmful if you're not careful, because if you lose that status, you lose your identity, you lose your sense of who you are, and you become lost. For example, many times if a wife doesn't have a job, her number one status is a wife and a mother, and then she gets divorced, she lost her master status, and it becomes very devastating. So as we choose our master status in society, be careful, don't let it override everything, because when you lose that status, it is very, very harmful. Talking about status symbols, every society has its own status symbols. Here's a Native American Indian, and he has one feather. Does that mean he's the chief? Does it mean he's the medicine man? We don't know. Here we have a dot in the middle of the forehead, another status symbol. So status symbols vary from culture to culture, from country to country, even within subcultures and countercultures. I'm going to show you a picture of a status symbol in a counterculture. There is a counterculture of people that are anorexics, and they even have their own support groups and their own websites to keep them going. And the very first picture that came up when I looked up for status symbol was one from anorexia. For this girl, this tube is a status symbol because she was able to get herself so thin that she needed a feeding tube. So for the rest of society, this would be negative, but for a counterculture, this is a status symbol. Here's some pictures from a Russian prison. All of these tattoos represent different things. This individual is in charge of gambling, hence the jester. This person is a thief, a cat burglar. This individual with the stars, each point on the star represents a year in prison. So status symbols are in countercultures or subcultures. This represents he's a pickpocket. This represents he dreams of escaping. And this is an enforcer. Now, one of the favorite things that sociologists love to study are what we call status inconsistencies. And these are when statuses kind of contradict one another. For example, having a mismatch between statuses. Here we have a Native American scout. Now, these are Native Americans, but they're helping the U.S. Army track and kill other Native Americans. So that would be an example of a status inconsistency. You would think that the Native Americans would want to protect other Native Americans, but in actuality, they're helping the U.S. Army. Another example, this is an American, and his name was John Walker Lind. However, he became obsessed with the Muslim religion, and he joined the Taliban. And so here's an American in the Taliban, and this is when he was caught. So here we have another example of status inconsistencies.